solo. I tell my team this, man, it's like building this thing is like therapy for me. We were all operating at a high level. It was for me, it was like that one moment, that part of the day. And it was usually, I'm talking to these guys in India and, it's like 5 o'clock in the morning for me and 6 o'clock for them at night. But just working with them and building and creating, it helped me be better for her. If you know someone out there, anybody knows someone out there that's taking care of a sick child, you don't know what they're going through. It's really, really hard to take care of sick kids. Anybody that does that, they deserve your respect for sure.
Matt, I've been looking forward to this opportunity for a long time, not necessarily podcast, but just to talk to you face to face. I mean, they use that word sales guru a lot, but I think it applies to you.
I appreciate that. I've been in sales for a long time. I'm an entrepreneur, but entrepreneurship, it's selling. You got to be on the front lines making it happen.
That's right. I want to take a position early on in this conversation of all your fans. You are like very unique, but where did you come from? What created this person who is like so knowledgeable about the nuances of sales? It started somewhere.
I was really lucky. I worked for a company called Airborne Express, which most people have probably never heard of. Airborne was a overnight carrier. We competed with UPS and FedEx, mostly in the 90s. In the early 2000s, it was acquired by DHL and then eventually shut down. But that's where I grew up in sales, 7 years, selling against two brands. Our edge was we could really shave on the costs. So we called on CFOs and had business conversations and made things happen. Our company had, a really bad reputation. In transportation, when you start out, it's kind of shaky trying to compete with UPS and FedEx. And so they had a really bad reputation, but by the time I got there, the service was pretty good. So we had to have that conversation to make decision makers understand that what we were in the past isn't what we are right now. I think that part of working in that for, 7 years, that really educated me. The leaders of that company had a really great sales training. It's strategic selling, Miller Hyman. I think a lot of people have probably heard of that. Nowadays, Keenan has gap selling, which is very similar. But that is the solve the problem mindset of sales. And when you sell that way, it always takes a conversation. I had a lot of conversations, Gene, and I think that's how I acclimated myself to this sales gig.
When I hear that so well explained, what my mind goes to, Matt, is like at bats. I mean, how are you going to be a good hitter unless you strike out a lot or you get a lot of pitches thrown at you and you get a lot of coaching and reps, right?
Yeah, it's the reps. I think having those conversations, each one of them, makes you better and stronger for the next one. Nowadays, we have this permission-based approach. Sometimes that makes sense. But I remember, when I first started out at cold calling, I would ask for permission and they would say no. I quickly moved away from that, You just didn't do that. You just went after it because you had them on the phone. Once you said the right words, the whole dynamic of that conversation changed. Once they heard something that they wanted to hear, that anger that they felt for you calling them, it fades away. A lot of salespeople don't move past that, Gene. I don't want to say it's an art, but it's certainly a skill that most salespeople nowadays just don't have.
That's why I really wanted to have this podcast with you, Matt, because, we're recording now in mid-December. This is going to go live in like early January. A lot of folks listening to this, I know are going to be tuning in to say, let's hear what Matt says about this. I'm starting my year in sales. Maybe I'm new to sales. Maybe I'm a vet. I want to get off to a good start. And I'm so glad that they're going to be able to listen to you because they need to get that mindset, man. You focus a lot on conversations, and that's what I love because why are people avoiding conversations today? Why are they just blasting well-crafted emails, which I'm not denigrating, but why do they want to do this one step away from the person stuff?
They don't want to fall on their face. They don't want to not have the words. They don't want to be embarrassed about not rising to that occasion. When you start out cold calling, you kind of need to do it in private. And you need to realize you're going to fall on your face. But it's okay. That's part of learning, right? It's just a little bit further that they got to go. And they're going to be over that hump where it's like, you know what? This isn't bad. That conversation I just had, wow, that was invigorating. Now I understand how you can flip the switch with a cold call. Because a lot of times with the people you're talking to, they don't understand why you're calling or what your benefit is. And if you can get that information across, it changes the dynamic of the conversation. You don't have to record the conversation, but you should be recording yourself. That's game tape for you. You should be trying to improve on everything that you're struggling with. I've worked with, I think, over 100 people with sales messaging. A lot of times what happens is, especially with younger, inexperienced people, is they just get a bad script from their company and they take that to the street and they fall on their face because of it. It's kind of a shame because I think there's some people that if they had the right words, they would succeed at cold calling, but they never find those words because they're following their company's directive. And a lot of times the people coming up with those words have never been on a cold call. They maybe never even had a sales conversation. That also makes it really difficult. I coached a guy, one of the last guys I did with this program with sales messaging, and he was in a group of 6 SDRs. He called me. This guy really scoped me out. He called some of my references before he even talked to me. And he told me, it was really interesting. He told me, I don't trust company trainings. And I was like, wow, that's really interesting. I've never heard anybody say that before. He had messaging. They had their messaging that they got from their company. It was terrible. We created new messaging for him. And they went through their first 3 to 6 months and all the other people got fired. He succeeded because he was saying the right words. And it goes back to Gene. A lot of people don't understand cold calling. They don't understand how you feel when that person picks up the phone. What type of messaging is going to get this angry person into a less angry state? Once you make that time valuable for them, that all fades away into nothing. I've been on both sides of cold call, so I've actually felt this, but sometimes people feel bad for being so mean at the beginning. Gene, I've felt that before. The rep said the right words to me and I was like, wait, this is really interesting. That really gruff, hey, this is Matt. I gave him at the beginning. I started to feel bad about that. I sense that with decision makers too. I've actually had people thank me for calling before. I don't think I've ever had anybody apologize, but it's a mental state that they're in and you can take them out of it, but you got to be aware of it.
Yeah. Yeah. That word really, awareness, Matt, that's what I use when I think of you, because you're aware. Like some of these things, like I follow you on LinkedIn and I love it when my feed pops up and says, Matt Wanty commented on this. I got to read your comment because people will be saying this yak, 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 yak. And then you'll make a comment that is either a summary thumbs up or summary thumbs down. You don't denigrate anyone, but I'm like right on point. And there seems to be a lack of awareness. Like people don't even understand how they're coming across or like you said, how to diffuse that grumpiness.
Yeah. They're not even thinking about that. They're thinking about how they're freaking out. I mean, like for a lot of people nowadays, I mean, I was an athlete. I played football and basketball in high school. It was, a dominant part of my life. I love sports and I excelled at it. I love the team aspect of sports, but it's being on that stage, being in that moment. You got, 1,000 people watching you and you're shooting a game-winning free throw. If you've been in that moment, that's a lot like a cold call. And that's where like muscle memory, really comes into play. That's why you really need to ingrain your words because sometimes you're going to be freaking out. If you have it inset in your mind and in your voice, it still comes out pretty good. You don't feel like it's coming out good, but it is. And what happens, Gene, is they respect you when you can face that. When they give you their real super gruff opening and you hit them with a super polished opening of your own, they're like, holy crap, I need to start listening to this person. Maybe they have something good for me.
Season 3 of the VanRocha Podcast is sponsored by Elomia Health. Did you know it can take 3 to 6 months for a patient to get their first appointment with a psychiatrist or a therapist? That's a very long wait. The AI mental health chatbot by Elomia is available 24/7 and immediate. Why not test drive Elomia at elomia.com? That's ELOMIA. See the future of AI for great mental health today. And now we'll get back to the episode.
I worked in tech 2016. I know that's kind of a little bit ago, but they pick up the phone. These decision makers pick up the phone way more than people say. You can talk to vice presidents at major corporations on any given day. I talk to them every day. I would get someone on the phone. That was the same case, 20 years ago. It's going to be the same thing in 20 years because That's their job. They got to figure, like, they have business problems. Sometimes when they pick up that phone, they can solve those problems. Picking up cold calls for vice presidents at major corps, it's part of the deal.
That's a very good point. I hope that people really resonate with that point, Matt, because I know when I was doing insurance sales for a long time and I was bringing in these particular products, some of the people that I dealt with who were the most closed-minded, I would loop back again maybe a year later. Those people who weren't liking to pick up the phone, like you say, a year later, 90% of the time they were gone.
Yeah, that's interesting. It's really interesting how, as cold callers, because we do this so repetitively, we notice things like that. That's probably one of the most important things decision makers should understand. You picking up cold calls is part. You see those posts on LinkedIn where people are complaining about getting cold calls. They're usually not like real decision makers that are posting that. So the salespeople should spend their time calling on the decision maker. But that's a really interesting point, G.
Yeah, I would see it over and over again. I'd be like, a lot of pushback, and they weren't like evil about it, but they're like, no. I was bringing something that was innovative that had helped a lot of other people in their position. And then I come back a year later, it never fails. It's like, oh, so-and-so's not here anymore. And I'm like, okay, doesn't surprise me. The dinosaur is now extinct.
Yeah. Sometimes with calling on people like that, they're rejecting you because they have no say in the company. Sometimes too, with decision makers, you can attach yourself to the wrong person. I've done that, a lot. You're attaching yourself to someone that's like a champion, but they're not respected by the decision maker. That's a big problem for you because as soon as you do that, you got one red flag against you. Nowadays, we have so much lead generation. We have so many people that are just trying to create meetings, and that just changes the whole scope of sales because your job is the meeting. The AE just wants the meeting, so they think they're going to close every deal. It's a weird way. Like for me, when I sell, a lot of stuff goes down in that first conversation. We're a long ways down the road. We're not handing this thing off to another person. The SDR AE thing, I've worked in it, so I've seen it on the inside. It's a weird way to do sales. If you want to be someone who's like a full cycle salesperson, it's not a great way to learn sales.
I had that in my notes, Matt, to ask you about that, what you thought about this SDR acronym and all this stuff, because like I had been doing sales for a long time. Then I went into a particular industry. We didn't use those terms. And then when I came out of that industry, all these acronyms were, I'm like, what the heck? Why do we have all these incremental people? And then, I got it. I'm like, okay, it is what it is. But like you say, I mean, you can get a lot of crap meetings scheduled if that's your only job.
Yeah. And people get really good at that. I've heard people on LinkedIn, part of their pitch is, hey, you want to be my first meeting of the day? They're just getting any meeting they can.
Yeah, man. It's like the criteria, do you have a pulse?
And then they wonder why that function isn't working. The outbound sales, it will never die. I mean, there will always be people that are really good at it. They can make a phone call. They've got emails that get people to pick up phone calls. That's a big thing that a lot of people don't do, but I use emails to get people to pick up. That's something that you should try to put into your game. Give them a couple calls first. And if they don't pick up, then try to get them on the phone by enticing them with an email that doesn't have a ton of information. That can be really effective. The parallel dialers nowadays, people are just jamming out all these dials to all these different people, but preciseness in outbound sales is everything. One of the biggest deals I sold in my career, it all started because of when I called the person. The time of the day, it was critical. And a lot of salespeople don't do that. If you're not considering the lifestyle of your decision makers, where they're at certain points in the day, you're missing a lot of the tactical part of sales. If you're loading up your parallel dialer at 2 p.m. Eastern and calling vice presidents for the next hour, you're not going to get anybody on the phone. And a lot of people do that, Gene. And sometimes I feel like they do that on purpose. They do it because they don't want that person to pick up the phone. I don't know if you've seen that. There's a young guy on LinkedIn and he interviews really successful people. Have you ever seen that guy? I don't know what it's called. Every once in a while, I'll see that. And recently, and I love this, he interviewed some tech founder who was really successful. He said one of the biggest mistakes tech entrepreneurs make is they don't get their product in front of people and improve it. And that's exactly what you have to do with cold calling. You have to get your cold call in front of people so you can navigate what works and what doesn't work. That's a big part that's missing because it's so scary for a lot of people. Whatever you produce in the world, don't hide it. Get it out there, get it in front of people. Then you learn. You can change it. You can make it better if they don't like, I thought that was great advice.
Where you said you can change it, you can make it better. Steve Jobs talked about that too. He talked about how you can change stuff. He was so cool, man. And it's like the thing of drawing him into the conversation, he was a cold caller. I mean, you don't think of him as a cold caller because if he's calling and somebody says, hey, Steve Jobs is on the line, of course, most of the time they're going to pick up, especially in his latter years. But he said, you got to pick up the phone. You got to call, you got to dial. He said, you got to be willing to crash and burn. And that, when I'm dialing, and I follow a lot of your teachings, Matt, because I've been following you now for over 5 years, I know what I think of is like, I'm about to call somebody who could care less who I am and what I'm doing.
Yeah. Yep.
When they answer, I'm like, I got to prove my worth quickly. You give me a lot of guidance. I wish everybody would focus on you. And I want you to start talking about solo because you're about to really blow it up as far as giving us some tools.
Solo, appreciate you bringing that up. I've been in sales for my whole career. I started building web applications like 18 years ago for one of my first companies. I got into that. And I'm probably more talented at web applications than sales, but it's like, if you could build a tool for the job you did your whole life, that's solo for me. One of the things that I recognized when I was helping a lot of people with cold calling and messaging is that there's a lot of sales engagement platforms, all-in-one sales tools out there, but there's not really one for people who aren't on a sales team. That's sort of where solo started for me, as I felt like there's like an underserved part of this market. All the things that I wanted in a sales tool, it's in there. But it's super simple. It's a very sleek tool that lets you make phone calls. It lets you send emails. It has pipeline. It has a cadence manager. It has email sequence. And then we're going to roll in some really cool things. But one of the biggest things Solo does for you is it thinks for you. It always tells you what you should be doing. In sales, especially when you're someone who's calling on the entire country, it's very difficult to do anything with timing because you have 4 time zones. All these different personas that are doing different things at different parts of the day. We built Solo to think and manage that for you. If I log in right now, it's going to give me a set of tasks to do. When I log in later today, it's going to give me a totally different set of tasks to do, all based upon the time of day, who I'm contacting, where they're located. It takes all those things into consideration. I never have to think. I just have to sell. That's super powerful. I've come to realize that all the technology that I've built in my career has this one thing. It tells you what to do. It doesn't make you do a lot of thinking. People like that. I mean, when I built tech for my company, it took 10 minutes to train the people on it, but everybody really enjoyed it, using it. If it wasn't there, it was like, it was unsettling, like if the internet was down or something was going on. I got a lot of confidence from that. And then I built a tech called Subroot, probably right when you started following me, James, 5 or 6 years ago, 6 years ago. And it was a different tool. When I introduced that to the market, I knew right away it wasn't going to work because it was too complicated. It was too complicated and it was also scary. Subroot was a tool that allowed salespeople, if they were in a conversation with someone, it allowed them to take them to this functioning website that they could then interact with them further. This was a need that I had. I found that other people had the need as well, but they weren't willing to use the tool. And I learned a lot from that experience. I've always been like, go after it because you're going to learn. My first business, it failed and I learned so much. And then I started my second one and that was successful. You have to do it to learn. You're not going to learn from a book. You're not going to learn from reading someone's post on LinkedIn. You're not going to learn enough until you get in there and really see it. That's been my philosophy.
I love it. I love it. So like with Solo, tell us how we can get to it so that we can download it, using it. Where is it at?
We're not available yet. I'm using LinkedIn, the great marketing platform, to attract early adopters. And we attracted a lot. We took that list and sort of narrowed it down to the people that are really going to utilize the tool. So we're starting January 6th. We're restarting on January 6th. We've had some glitches, but we're also adding some really important things. So early December, we decided just to shut it down for a minute and reset on January 6th. Most people aren't doing outbound sales right now. So it kind of made sense for us to do that. Enhancing the email sender. It's real basic right now, but we're taking it. It's going to be really cool. It's going to have a really cool way to do templates that I think is new to the market. Everything that we're doing with Solo is built for people that aren't going to get trained. They're not going to have anybody sitting over them, making them use this platform. And that's what happens with a lot of these super complicated platforms is that the adoption is forced. You either use it or you don't have your job. That was the thing with Solo that me and the team have always been aware of is we don't have that. They have to adopt it. It has to be valuable to them to keep using it. I've been using it since August. I might be too confident, but I really love it. It's just really simple. It would be difficult for me to switch to anything else because then I would have to start doing some thinking. And I'm really used to not doing that already. So for my outbound sales, and I think a lot of people fall in this category, it's not something I do all day. It's like just a piece of my puzzle. So when I log into Solo, I just fire off. And then, 20, 30 minutes might be my session. It doesn't feel like a wait as much. Like, oh, I got to go do this. I feel like I'm getting into like a video game for a minute. I really like that feeling. We slowed down with our development a little bit, and that's mostly budget, but we built a good product. I think we're going to be successful with it, Gene.
Yes, I know so. And the time frame we're in, again, we're talking in mid-December. So this is going to air after January 6th, like shortly after that.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. GTMsolo.com. You can sign up 30 days free is our offer right now. And that will start in mid-January.
Okay. Well, see, when this airs, it's going to be right there. So like, hey.
Yes. The first quarter, I have super high expectations for Solo. Features that are going to be added that are going to make things even easier for our users. The biggest theme with Solo for people out there that are looking for like an all-in-one sales tool, a tool that's going to manage all of their outbound, their pipeline. It's simple. It's really easy to use, and we're going to just keep making it easier to use and take out those little annoying parts of your day that you have to manage. Gene, a lot of times people don't even try to manage it. When I was in sales and I was calling on the entire country, I just gave up. It gets really complicated. You have a decision maker rolling through on the West Coast and then another one on the East Coast. I can't really see that in the system I'm using. I'm calling the West Coast at 6:00 in the morning for them. I have no idea. Those things happen quite a bit with salespeople, and that's what Solo manages for you. It makes that really easy.
And now, a brief message from our sponsor, Alomia Health. Here's one of their co-founders, Nick Manzik.
We're building Alomia because we care about people and their mental health. You see those stats that pop up on news. You see them on article headlines. Mental health's declining. Social media is the issue. COVID was the issue. Debt, stress. The world is becoming a little more disconnected. At least that's what we're being told. We're not trying to replace therapists. We're trying to just give people another resource to work on their mental health. If we can be part of someone's mental health journey and help them start it or dive deeper or even get to a much better place, that's our goal.
Nick, thank you so much for that description of what Alomia does. Again, that's Alomia Health at alomia.com. ELOMIA. Now let's return to our conversation.
So what I do is I create sort of the structure and the solution and the idea, but the next part is the UI. That person, when it comes to building technology, they're so critical. They take the idea and turn it into an interface. And if that interface is complicated and difficult to use, that makes the software bad. UI is such a critical part of creating software. And when we built Solo, it's like, I learned so much from the guys that are on the team because they're just talented. They're really good at what they do. And with Solo, I had to build a software team. And just like any profession, man, there's bad ones and there's good ones. And I just kept going. I would try someone out and they wouldn't work. And then I'd try another one out and they wouldn't work. And I got to the point where I was like, okay, I'm not going to quit, but I'm going to take a break. I need a refresher. And then the next day I met our engineer who's like now the shareholder in the company. He's built a lot of our intelligence stuff. Some people just love code. They love the code. I met him we just took off. And then we found our UI guy. We just realized how talented he was at it. He comes up with great stuff every time. And what's really amazing about it is he only asks me like 1 or 2 questions. I tell him what we need. He'll come back with 1 or 2 questions, and then he'll give us a UI, and we'll be like, wow.
It's so funny. Again, I get a Steve Jobs flashback, because he said when he was like in his early 30s, back when we realized we were going to be a professional company, he said in one of his clips, Matt, we went on higher professional management. And then he paused. He said they were a bunch of bozos.
Yeah.
He said they knew how to manage, but they didn't know how to do anything. That's kind of what you're saying. But I know you're not denigrating anyone, but it's like sometimes some people, they just don't know how to do it. You have found through trial and error the people who really know how to do it. I just love that, because that's the formula, right?
If you want to build something great, if you want to do something great, you got to be an expert, but you also have to get experts at every piece. If you do that, what you build is really incredible. It doesn't matter if it's software or whatever. And I would say this advice to people out there: become an expert. When you're an expert at something, that's when you can become really valuable.
That point is huge. Define expert from your point of view. What is an expert according to Matt Wanty?
I mean, an expert is the person who knows the most about the subject. My wife came to me last year for her job. She had to do goals. And I was like, tell them you want to become a subject matter expert. So she did that. Now she gets called for certain things from people that are, like to have 20, 30 years of experience more than her. Go to her, because she's now the subject matter expert at that particular thing. So if it's something that you're passionate about, then that's even the bee's knees right there, because now you're an expert at something that you love. Hopefully you can turn that into some type of income or occupation. But I feel like the people that I meet in my life that are experts are the happiest people.
Why?
Because they're doing what they want to do. Their craft. They love their craft. Our engineer, I could tell right away he loved Java, because I paid him for a certain amount of hours, but he just kept working. We have so many problems in the world, and we don't have enough experts trying to solve them. You can really tell. LinkedIn is so valuable with this. If you want to see if someone's an expert, go to their recommendations. If they are truly an expert at what they do, someone will have given them a recommendation and said that. If someone says they're an expert, then you know you're onto something.
That's really good stuff. So I want to round this out with the family man, Matt. You're a good family man. How do you balance all that? Because a lot of people would think, hey, how could he balance all that when he's so focused on these other things? But you balance it, Matt. How do you do it? As you talk about a lot about your interchange with your wife. That's obviously some good stuff. How are you able to be the family man that you are?
Oh man, I don't know. I just, my daughter has an illness. She's a carrier for Mediterranean fever. She has fever. She's had them since she was 3. She's 7 now. You have kids, Jane. You just do whatever you got to do. They're everything. She's had a really unfortunate start to her life. So my focus is just to try to make her days as good as possible. So most of my time I actually spend with my daughter. She sleeps like 10, 11 hours. So I get to work for like 3 or 4 hours while she's sleeping right now. So that's a big part of how I get to stay productive. But she's a lot of work. We're in the medical process, and we're going to try a treatment here soon. So that would make an amazing difference if we can get her fever to subside. But she's an amazing little kid. A lot of people don't understand how to be around sick children. I got some really good advice early on in this. Kids that are sick, you can't really focus too much on how they're acting. They're sick. What's really critical is how you're acting, because that's what she sees. So early on in this journey, I got some advice towards that. It's really helped me because, I try to just give her a lot of happy-go-lucky, go with the flow. When she's feeling well, I see that in her personality, and it makes me feel really good. But she's an amazing little girl. We talk about a lot how we're lucky that we get to spend so much time together. So, I've been there for most of her life, which, that wasn't the plan, Gene. I was supposed to do other stuff, but it worked out that way. I just get her to this next step where she can just live a normal life. That's really the number one thing that I think about every day. And then solo's number 2.
Yeah, that's the priority order.
Yep, it is. And it's hard to do LinkedIn, right? You got to be active and you got to be stuff. But I figured out a way to get in there and do it. I was dormant for a long time just because I couldn't take care of her and be, doing what I wanted to do on LinkedIn. But now I've got a good strategy working, and she's feeling actually a lot better this year than last year. We relocated again, and that's really helped her. Her disease is really impacted by humidity. So naturally, we moved to Colorado, and her life has like dramatically improved. So there's been a lot of positive going on, but the illness is still there. She can't function like she wants to function, but we're going to try treatment and see if that works, and then just kind of go from there.
Yeah, your example, Matt, because I knew those things. I wanted to draw it out of you because you've shared that with me before, but a lot of people following you on LinkedIn wouldn't know that you are basically managing and helping your daughter's life quality. And at the same time, you're sharing with us so many solutions and ideas. And that makes what you share even more amazing because you're like 100% focused on what you're talking about, but like you're 1,000% focused on her. So, I mean, we appreciate that priority.
I really appreciate all that, Gene. I don't write about this. It's not something I'm going to write about for a little while, but I don't want to write posts that go viral because my daughter has an illness. That's just, to me, that's really silly. But
And it will go viral because of who you are. So yeah, you're right.
yeah, and I just don't write about it. It's just not something that I'm ready for. But solo, I tell my team this, man. It's like building this thing is like therapy for me. We were all operating at a high level. It was for me. It was like that one moment, that part of the day, and it was usually, I'm talking to these guys in India, and it's like 5 o'clock in the morning for me and 6 o'clock for them at night. But just working with them and building and creating, it helped me be better for her. If you know someone out there, anybody knows someone out there that's taking care of a sick child, you don't know what they're going through. It's really, really hard to take care of sick kids. Anybody that does that, they deserve your respect for sure.
That's right. And you got our respect, Matt.
I appreciate that, Gene. I appreciate that. We recently got this diagnosis with the Mediterranean fever. There's a treatment option. So I'm feeling really good that this treatment is going to actually help her. But however long she needs us to be, whatever she needs us to be, that's what me and my wife are going to do.
Yeah. Well, I know, when I get my solo subscription, that is after my 30-day trial, I'll be thinking, well, what I'm paying for is helping Matt help his daughter.
I appreciate that. That's why you haven't been set up yet, because we're not ready for that quite yet. We were ready for a minute, and the way technology works, man, like when you add stuff, and we added some pretty big stuff, it's a ripple effect of problems, and we're sorted. We actually are sorted on that. But now I got the guys adding a bunch of new stuff that's going to help too. So we'll be back live, ready for the general public by mid-January.
Good. Some sales software finally makes sense, man. Because I'm like, who created? And when I try these other stuff, I'm like, who created this?
Yeah. It's interesting watching people build software for something they know nothing about. You can do that if you're like Steve Jobs and you're making that phone call and you're having that conversation and understanding. The information that can be shared is just so much more impactful than trying to send an email or even a video message.
Well, Matt, I'm going to wrap it up because, man, you just dropped bombs on us.
Gene, I really appreciate all your support. I definitely wanted to be here for you today. I normally wouldn't do this. I need to start doing this more for solos. I can tell you're a really good person. I hope this helps you too. The future looks good, man.